Okay, I'll get started then. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So, the research that I'm going to talk about is a malware, Weaxor malware, which has been rebranded as Mallox ransomware, which is having a unique payload delivery method. So, the research was done by me, my two of my colleagues, Lakshmi and Neeraj. So, I'm presenting here on their behalf as well. So, moving ahead. So, so the key discussion of the points include introduction of like what I'm talking about, the infection chain, the technical analysis, characteristics of the Weaxor ransomware, and some observed communications here. So in 2023, we observed that there was a surge in Mallox ransomware cases. So there was a very good surge of Mallox ransomware, and every now and then, different systems were getting infected with that ransomware. By the end of 2024, we observed similar ways have been observed to get into the system as was done by Mallox ransomware. It just the next of the infection change remained different, but the final execution and the initial phase remained slightly similar, which made us believe that it could be a possible rebranding of the Mallox ransomware. Similar to Mallox ransomware, Weaxor ransomware also targeted vulnerable MS SQL servers, and also it shared some structural similarities, like it had different multi-layered obfuscation in initial layers, which so in case of Mallox, there was a lot of bat loaders along with some PowerShell loaders. Here we observed a lot of PowerShell loaders. It also incorporated SQLPS.exe instead of solely relying on PowerShell. And this time we observed in case of Weaxor ransomware that it deployed Cobalt Strike beacon shellcode in its attack chain, which was not observed previously in case of Mallox. So this is the infection chain. Here you can see that there was a compromised MS SQL through which this process sqlps.exe was run, and it led to the execution of a malicious PowerShell file which was base64 encoded. Now it downloaded two different payloads. Payload 1, which was used for performing process injection and AMSI bypass, so that the payload 2 can get executed and the final malicious Weaxor ransomware can also get executed. Now, payload 2 performed some process injection, which led to the injection of Cobalt Strike shellcode. It connected to the command and control server, which used another obfuscated JS, and it led to the deployment of the final executable, which is our Weaxor ransomware payload. Now, coming to the important part, like the first malicious PowerShell file that we are talking about, this is the one which is that PowerShell file. So here you can see that it has two downloaded strings, and it tries to download two different payloads, payload 1 and payload 2. So this is how the payload 1 looked like, and this is how the payload 2 looked like. They both were base64 encoded. Even in this PowerShell code, you can see how you can decode it. It is already mentioned what to replace and how to decode it. So we followed the same process to decode payload 1 and payload 2. So the payload 1, while analyzing, we observed both of them were PowerShell payloads, and the payload 1 tried to bypass AMSI so that malicious PowerShell codes can be run without any problem, used sqlps.exe for SQL-based PowerShell commands. It also performed dynamic code execution. And also, as I already mentioned, the AMSI bypass highlighted a strategy to evade Windows anti-malware scan. So as a result, payload 2 can directly perform invocation of memory operations indicating process injection. The content also revealed a shellcode. In case of Mallox ransomware, we did not observe any shellcode, but this time in the rebranding of Mallox or in Weaxor ransomware, we observed that it had some shellcode which confirmed as a Cobalt Strike beacon. So the shellcode had cryptographic processes, C to server communications, and dynamic API calls. Also, the shellcode acted as a backdoor or downloader for additional payloads. Now, after successful shellcode execution, we observed the shellcode to be communicating with this IP, which is a Cobalt Strike Beacon IP. This IP, as you can see, was trying to connect to some kind of malicious JavaScript code. Now, if you see how it deployed the Weaxor ransomware, the shellcode used HTTP communication to connect with a Cobalt Strike C2 server at this IP, as already shown here, and it enabled data exfiltration and deployment of Weaxor ransomware. So here it led to the deployment of the Weaxor ransomware. So it was very important for the shellcode to connect to this IP. If it could not connect to this IP, it would not be able to deploy the Weaxor ransomware into the infected machine. Now, if you go through the characteristics of the Weaxor ransomware, it behaves like any other ransomware where it encrypts the file and renames the extension to its Weaxor malware. For example, for WannaCry, there was WNCRY. So in the same way, for Weaxor, the extension that they used was ROX with the ROX extension. Also, you will see that recoveryinfo.txt appeared in the affected directories, which mentioned about how to pay the ransom and how to contact them for paying the ransom. We also observed how the Weaxor ransomware, after encrypting the device, was making the communication. So the Weaxor ransomware was connecting to this IP. As you can see, this is the IP which was getting connected for uh, Cobalt Strike Beacon, and then it was connecting to these. Here you can see how it was actually sharing some sort of data which is important for performing the encryption. Here you can see, here you can also see that there was another subsequent C2 communication which was connecting to Weaxor ransomware server at this IP. Here this is the IP which is mentioned for further stages of infection. So this was our research from our end. So you can reach out to me for further questions, or you can ask me any more questions over here. So thank you so much.